Hey everyone, this is Mike from the Comic Book Trove, here today with another Omnibus review. And today I'm going to be taking a look at the Avengers Omnibus Volume 4. I've had a few requests to take a look at this book. I have looked at the previous volumes in recent weeks. I've gone through volumes 1, 2 and 3. So feel free to go back and check those out if you're interested. I've got them in a playlist on the channel. But let's take a look at this fourth and so far latest volume today and showcase this. Although this is the latest volume and this did come out back in 2019, so a while ago now, and there is no word yet on a possible Volume 5, I'm definitely holding out hope that we might see that in the near future. As I pointed out in my previous reviews of the other volumes, next year, 2023, will be the 60th anniversary of the Avengers, so kind of feels like that would be a good year to maybe see some reprints of the other stuff, this one and the other volumes, and some new stuff as well, including hopefully a Volume 5. I would love to see that. But here and now, let's take a look at this book, showcase it and give you an idea of what it looks like if you want to hopefully just get a better idea of what this book is and what's in it. First, I have to point out just how much I love this stunning piece of artwork on the cover here by the great Arthur Adams. This was the standard variant cover for the Omnibus, and it was original artwork that Adams did specifically for this Omnibus edition, and I absolutely love it. I just think every character looks great. I love when he does stuff like this. He did a similar cover for the Fantastic Four Omnibus Volume 4 as well. Very similar style, just kind of showcasing a huge array of characters who were featured in the series up until the point of the material in the book. And I just think this looks really great, you know. The DM cover was one of the Neil Adams covers in here, which is also very cool, obviously. But I really prefer this. I absolutely love it. You know, as I said before, if there's an Arthur Adams cover of an omnibus, it's usually the one that I go with. He's a top quality artist and I love his covers. Taking a look around the rest of the book here then, on the dust jacket we've got the creator names down there. We've got the final issues in here by Roy Thomas, finishing off his long run writing the series. He was followed by Steve Englehart, who succeeded him as the writer. And we get a number of different artists in here, but the main ones we see listed there are, of course, Neil Adams, Sal Buscema, Bob Brown. But as I say, there are others as well featuring in here. And on the back, you get your cover gallery. And what you really see in here, I suppose there's two major stories. This book starts off with the classic Kree-Skrull War storyline. And then there's also a kind of event going on at the end as well, the Avengers Vs Defenders storyline, the first time those two teams meet. You got your full contents down there if you want to take a look at those. Let's look at the book itself then. So the design of the hardcover, as was the case with your Silver and Bronze Age era omnibuses back at this point, very plain design, just standard black. You got your title of the series there, an identical spine, and a plain back. Nothing there at all. If this were to be reprinted, I'm very sure there would be an Avengers logo or something on the back there, because that seems to be the newest style that they go with, and that would obviously apply to other volumes as well. Okay, so taking a look in the book, as I mentioned already, the very first issue collected in here, which is issue 89, is the first issue of the Kree-Skrull War. The Kree-Skrull War. That's a bit of a tongue twister every time you have to say it. And that's really Marvel's first, you could call it Marvel's first event, published at a time here in the early 70s where event comics were really not a thing yet, but you could argue very strongly, I think, that the Kree-Skrull War was really the template from which future events would refer back to and expand upon. You get a lengthy introduction here at the beginning of the book by Roy Thomas, as he wrote similar ones in the previous volumes as well. The guy is a true comics historian. He gives you a lot of information of what was going on behind the scenes, gives a lot of context to the reason certain plot decisions were made, etc. A really insightful read, well worth checking out that and his other introductions as well, if you get a hold of this book. As I said before, I feel like I learn something every time I read one of his introductions, I really do. So let's get going then with issue 89. So I won't do a full plot breakdown of the stories in here. You know, as always with pretty much any omnibus, there's a lot of material in the book and it would take a long time to really fully summarize everything. So I'll give an overview, but I want to give a spoiler warning because I will probably mention some key details. So if you've never read the Kree-Skrull War or these Avengers issues in general and you don't want to hear any spoiler material at all, then just fair warning that I may say something or show something off inadvertently that you don't necessarily want to see / hear. But yeah, so this is a story, really interesting story. I like how this particular event, I'm going to call it an event even though it's officially not an event, but it kind of is. It starts off relatively grounded, okay? I mean, it's got aliens and robots and superheroes, so obviously it's not really grounded in any traditional sense of that word. It's all very fantastical. But the story kind of continues to accelerate and escalate in cosmic scale as it goes along. So initially it's primarily all based on Earth, and then by the end of it you're having full-blown spaceship battles in space. But what's basically going on in this story is you've got the Kree, led by the Supreme Intelligence and Ronan the Accuser. And then you've got the Skrull Warriors as well, and they're, as always, at each other's throats. You know, those two races, for the entirety of Marvel's history, despise each other and pretty much regularly at war. But in this particular story, the war is centering around Earth. Earth is effectively the chosen battleground, so of course the Avengers and humans in general are really caught in the middle of this conflict. You also have Captain Marvel, who is the original Captain Marvel, that is, Marvel, the Kree warrior, who is kind of an outcast at this point of the Kree people, seen as a rebel, and he ends up kind of allied with the Avengers. And things get complicated because you get this band of kind of extremist politicians and whatnot who start to claim that the Avengers are like alien sympathizers, that they've turned on humanity. So you get large chunks of people kind of turning against the Avengers. They think they're alien sympathizers, or, you know. Yeah, really a lot of stuff going on in this story. I mean, it only lasts for about 9 issues or something, and it doesn't cross over with anything, so it is just a straight run of issues of the Avengers series, which is why I say it's such in a way it's beautifully simple compared to what events would go on to be, with many tie-ins and crossovers and who knows what, you know, build up to it, fallout from it. This is all pretty self-contained, really, as a storyline. It's I tell you for a fact, if a storyline like this had come out years after this, you know, just a few years later, it definitely would have been turned into a bigger thing than it was in here. But here's one of the absolute highlights. Got to point this out. As of issue 93, for 4 issues, we get artwork by the late, great Neil Adams. And the run of issues he does in here is very short but very sweet, as was his run on the X-Men, really. I mean, Neil Adams, his body of work for Marvel in particular was never very big. You know, he didn't do a whole lot for Marvel over the years, but I think arguably the issues in here are very much the best work he did. I absolutely love it. This page here, you lose a little bit, unfortunately, due to gutter loss. That's really the nature of how it goes with a big book like this on a spread page. But I love this image of the Vision, who is unconscious at this point. I just love that double page layout. And what you've got here is Hank Pym as Ant-Man. Great issue where he shrinks down to a tiny size to go inside the Vision to fix him, basically, from within. And it's a really cool kind of journey to the center of the earth sort of homage. Really great. Honestly, these next few issues, it's very easy to just stop and stare at the Neil Adams artwork. Just stunning stuff. Really, you know, you can't really praise Neil Adams enough. A true legend of the industry, one of the absolute all-time great artists. Very easy to see why he was so influential, you know, back at this point in the late 60s into early 70s. The guy inspired a whole bunch of future artists, you know, like John Byrne, I think, famously always cited Neil Adams as one of his key inspirations. And as I say, it's very easy to see why. Just some really cool artwork that he produced, you know, really dynamic stuff. And just a shame that you don't get a few more issues of it, really, but there you go. Neil Adams just never really had a long stint working at Marvel, so it is what it is. But this is part of the story where we see some of the fallout from the fact that people think the Avengers are turning on humanity. So these characters here, these mandroids, I think they're called, they are basically guys in high-tech suits. They come to fight the Avengers. Really love this splash page. Neil Adams again. This is Triton of the Inhumans, because the Inhumans kind of get brought into this story as well. As I say, it really grows in scale. You get more and more characters being brought in. It turns into a very cosmic thing, ultimately. You know, as we see in the next couple of issues, as I flick through here, you know, like by this point, for example, see we've got full-blown space battles going on by the end of this story. But throughout this whole book, you know, and really throughout the entirety of the vast majority of all 4 volumes of this classic Avengers stuff, I think you get some really, really great artwork by all the different artists who work on here. Issue 97, unfortunately by this point Neil Adams has gone. He did issues 93 to 96, but not to worry, because you get an issue here by the great John Buscema, so hardly a huge downgrade. And then from here, he only does the 1 issue at this point, Buscema, before being replaced briefly by Barry Windsor Smith, or just Barry Smith as he was at this point. One thing I really like about Barry Smith's work on the series, I really like how he drew the Vision, even if he kind of has, it kind of seems like his head's a little bit too big sometimes for his body in certain pages. I think there's one in particular, like kind of like this one. I don't know, but I think it looks cool. Arguably even here, Iron Man's head looks a little bit weird. Anyway, cool artist again. Brings some cool work to this series, but it's another brief run. He only does another 3 issues. But we're into the final issues here by Roy Thomas, and what was interesting in the introduction, he mentions how in these final few issues, issue 104 being his last, he didn't expect to be leaving the series at that point. He wasn't planning for it to be his final issue. I think that's often the case, really, when you have a writer and or artist who does a lengthy run. I don't think they necessarily always plan to jump off a book quite when they do. But that's how it worked out. You get a nice little kind of double introduction here. A farewell message from Roy Thomas explaining what I've just mentioned, really, his final issues on the series, and then one by Steve Englehart, who took over. And you get a number of different issues here. This bit in between, these final issues of Roy Thomas's run, and then the very first few, like 6 or so issues of Steve Englehart's run, are a little bit ropey and a little bit inconsistent. They don't really have much of a flow to them. There's a couple of fill-in issues thrown in here as well, where they kind of needed to buy some time to think of a new storyline, so they threw in a previously produced, readily prepared story to serve as a random one-off fill-in. Get a new artist here, Rich Buckler, comes onto the series. And again, some good work. You know, I think it's potentially just me, but I always look at the issues in here and really just enjoy this style of artwork. I think in general, the kind of Bronze Age style, which we're into by this point, you know, getting towards the mid-70s. This is about, well, early 70s, I guess, but moving further into the Bronze Age, and I really like the general 70s style. I think in the 70s, there's a lot of great artwork at Marvel. Which is not to say that there wasn't in other decades as well, obviously, but I just like this style. I think it's really cool. It's kind of still got that Silver Age element to it, but you can also see a lot of instances of more experimental stuff being tried, you know, and things moving on a little bit. So it's nice. It's a cool transition phase, I think, for comic artwork in general, the 70s and the Bronze Age. One thing that Steve Englehart really started to build on was the romance between Wanda and Scarlet Witch. So you started to see very early, I suppose, examples of that being maybe foreshadowed in the previous volume, in Volume 3, with Roy Thomas writing it. But I think Englehart really pushed it more to the front and centre of the story. And started to build that relationship up for real. I think this is one of those fill-in issues. You can usually tell when it's a fill-in issue because it's usually just a series of random fights without a whole lot of story around it to make it that interesting. But anyway, what we get towards the end of this run, as I already mentioned at the beginning, the second kind of major story going on here after the Kree-Skrull War is the first conflict with the Avengers and the, at this point, newly formed Defenders. I don't think the Defenders had even been around very long at this point. Just a few issues, really. But that's it's not like an all-time classic story like the Kree-Skrull War. It's more of a series of superhero fights, really. I suppose it's just an early example of one of those things happening, like Avengers vs X-Men and stuff like that that's happened in the years since. You do get the return here of Black Widow, who had been absent for a while, along with Daredevil guest starring. Pretty cool. But it's a cool era for the Avengers. I definitely would like to see a Volume 5, just so we can kind of go further into the 70s and maybe even get to the point where George Perez first came onto the series as artist, which I think happened in the, I think, close to 150, issue 150. I think a 5th volume would take us roundabout to that point, which would be great if we could see some of those issues ultimately collected in this format. But let me know, as always, let me know what you think about this run and the material in this book, if you've got it yourself or just read it in another way. Always interested to hear the opinions of others. I mean, how do you feel the Kree-Skrull War holds up as a story? It's highly regarded to this day, and I think rightly so. It's got a lot of historical importance to Marvel in general, arguably comics in general, because of the fact that it was one of the earliest kind of storylines on that scale that you could argue was a very early example of a comic book event. And it's really the highlight of this book. I keep talking about it, but I think it's definitely the most significant thing in here. But I'm just flicking back a few pages here because I want to highlight a key character who appears in here, which is Mantis, who we see here. Mantis, who's been, I suppose, reinterpreted and reimagined and made more popular and famous in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies in the MCU. But we see her first appearances in here, created by Steve Englehart, and a character with whom he had a very strong attachment. I suppose he still does to this day, because he kind of, when he left Marvel, he sort of took Mantis with him, like not literally, because you can't do that, but I can't remember where it was he went to work after Marvel, but I know that he worked at a couple of different companies where he basically just created a character who was Mantis in all but name, more or less. So yeah, he really liked this character. And it's interesting in his introduction, the reason he gives, at least one of his primary reasons for introducing Mantis in the team, which was not just to introduce another female character, but to introduce, again in his words, like a sexy character, to add a bit more of a mature tone, I suppose, to the book. He felt that comic books in general up until this point were a bit too innocent, I suppose you could say, and he wanted to just bring in a bit of reality, and the aspect of reality that he chose to introduce effectively was, I guess, sex appeal, or a bit more just sexuality in general into the book, by bringing in an attractive female character who the male characters would be attracted to. I don't know if it's the most logical reasoning, I don't know, but that's what he gives as his reason anyway. Anyway, we're moving into the issues here where the Defenders and the Avengers are clashing. There's an issue here, it's pretty cool, where Vision fights the Silver Surfer. That's pretty good. This is cool. A personal plea from your blushing bullpen. I love the stuff like this that gets included sometimes. The stuff of the era, I think Marvel was just such a cool brand, from the 60s onwards. I mean, that arguably Stan Lee's biggest contribution to Marvel, and the entire company was establishing Marvel not just as a publishing company, but as a kind of a brand, with its own feel, its own way of talking to its readers and its fans. He gave Marvel a strong identity. I think that was in large part thanks to Stan Lee, who did that. So it's always cool to see that stuff anyway. Maybe you disagree on that, but that's kind of how I've always seen it. Here we've got the Valkyrie as well. I think I touched upon the storyline that's collected in the 3rd volume of this, where the Valkyrie first appeared, but it turned out not to be her. It was the Enchantress in disguise as her. By this point, this is the real Valkyrie, and she's on the Defenders team. And Defenders is a pretty fun book as well. They had an omnibus actually released, I think, last year, or maybe the year before that. Yeah, I wouldn't say last year. Collecting the the first chunk of Defenders material from the very beginning. I don't personally have that book myself, but I don't know. I may get it. I don't know. Should I get that book? Maybe let me know. I don't know. There's so many books to get. You know, it's hard to choose. Oh dear, first world problems. But what ends up happening anyway, in kind of classic fashion, after they've had various fights, the Avengers, the Offenders, and the Devengers, the Avengers and Defenders, they team up and come together to fight a bigger threat, which I believe involves Dormammu from Doctor Strange. Yeah, it does. And Loki as well, who's showing up in this storyline. Here's a bit of trivia. The fight, well, not the fight, but just the fact that Loki is appearing here in Avengers. This is the first time that the Avengers take on Loki in their own series since Avengers issue 1, which started the whole thing. Yeah. Cool stuff, you know, not the greatest ever story, the Avengers Defenders thing, but, you know, it's got a lot of fun. It's got that classic superhero v superhero vibe. And then this issue was the last one in the book, issue 119. Oh, we've now got Bob Brown as the artist. Well, he'd come on a little bit earlier than this, to be fair. But yeah, for me, it's I really want to read on. You know, I don't want to have to stop here with Avengers. You know, I really want to see a 5th volume just so we can get more of this series. But then again, I think that about a lot of these numbered volume omnibuses collecting the classic Marvel stuff. You know, I want to see more Hulk, I want to see more Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, pretty much everything that there can be more of. I want to see more of it, but we will see if we get more of any of that stuff, including this. Extras in the back then, some cool sketches by Neil Adams here, some original pencils, really nice to see that. Oh, there we go, that's that page I love so much in pencil format. Yeah, rightly so, collecting a lot of the Neil Adams stuff in here in particular. I think that run of 4 issues is a real highlight of this book, no doubt. All this again, Neil Adams and Tom Palmer. Tom Palmer being the inker. Then you get some Rich Buckler pencils, Bob Brown pencils. Quite a lot of pencils in this book. You don't normally get this many original pencils. Then we've got some reprint covers, posters, and other alternative pages and stuff. Good stuff. Some of those recoloured covers you see now and again, and there's that great image by Arthur Adams again for the standard variant, in case you happened to get the DM variant cover. So there we go then, that's the 4th and so far latest volume of Avengers Omnibuses in terms of this classic stuff. Yeah, thanks as always for watching, guys. It was an interesting book to flick through for myself. Hopefully it was for you watching as well. Gave you some insight maybe, or something that maybe previously didn't know. Maybe just helped you make your mind up one way or the other, whether or not you want to get this book at some point if you don't already have it. But let me know what you think about this classic Avengers stuff, and that's maybe the whole Avengers run up until this point in general. Do you want to see a volume 5 as much as I do? Because I really do. And yeah, otherwise, thanks again for watching. I will be back again soon to discuss something else.